The moment that destroyed my marriage wasn't walking in on my husband with another woman, wasn't finding suspicious text messages, wasn't discovering secret credit card statements. It was my 6-year-old daughter Emma bouncing into our kitchen after spending Saturday afternoon with her father, her face bright with excitement as she announced, "Mommy, Daddy bought the prettiest necklace today, but he said it's not for you." The innocent joy in her voice as she described the sparkling diamonds and delicate gold chain made my blood turn to ice, because I knew with absolute certainty that no surprise jewelry was coming my way. Our anniversary had passed 3 months ago without acknowledgement. My birthday had been marked with a hastily purchased gift card, and Christmas was still 6 months away. When I asked Emma who the necklace was for, her response shattered 10 years of trust with 4 devastating words. The pretty lady, "Mommy." In that instant, watching my daughter's confusion as my face changed from curiosity to horror, I realized that my husband hadn't just been having an affair. He had been using our innocent child as cover for his betrayal, taking her along on shopping trips for his mistress, while she unknowingly became a witness to the systematic destruction of her own family. The jewelry Emma described wasn't the kind of casual gift you buy on impulse, or the sort of present that could be explained away as a business obligation or family courtesy. She used words like sparkly like the stars and prettier than princess jewelry, with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that only comes from actually seeing something magnificent, something worth remembering and talking about for hours afterward. When I gently pressed for more details, she painted a picture of an expensive piece from an upscale jewelry store, the kind of place where purchases require thought and significant financial investment, where salespeople remember customers and where transactions are recorded for insurance and warranty purposes. This wasn't a spontaneous gesture or a moment of weakness. This was a deliberate, expensive declaration of affection for someone who wasn't his wife, purchased in the presence of the child who trusted him more than anyone else in the world. What made Emma's revelation particularly devastating was the casual way she delivered it. The complete absence of awareness that she was describing something that would destroy her mother's world and change her own life forever. She spoke about the jewelry shopping trip the same way she talked about getting ice cream or visiting the park. It was just another fun adventure with Daddy, another special moment that made her feel important and included in adult activities. Her innocence was so complete, her trust in her father so absolute, that it had never occurred to her to question why this beautiful necklace wasn't meant for the woman who wore Daddy's wedding ring, who slept in Daddy's bed, who had given birth to the little girl who was now unknowingly delivering the news of her own parents' marital destruction. For 10 years I had built my identity around being David's wife and Emma's mother, around the family we had created together, and the future we were building with careful planning and shared dreams. Our marriage had been a love story that began in college, continued through graduate school, and flourished during the early years of establishing careers and becoming parents. David was charming in the way that made strangers feel like old friends, successful in the way that promised long-term security, devoted in the way that made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. We had weathered the normal challenges of early marriage: financial stress, career pressures, the exhaustion of new parenthood, with the kind of partnership that made other couples envious of our communication and teamwork. Friends regularly commented on how solid our relationship seemed, how well we balanced each other's strengths and weaknesses, how natural we looked together as we navigated the complex choreography of modern marriage and parenthood. The life we had built together was everything I had dreamed of during those planning conversations in college, when we would stay up late talking about the kind of family we wanted to create, and the values we wanted to pass on to our children. Our home was warm and welcoming, filled with family photos and Emma's artwork, and the comfortable chaos of a household where people genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We had traditions that gave our year structure and meaning: elaborate birthday celebrations, cozy holiday gatherings, annual vacation trips that created memories Emma would carry into her own adulthood. David was present for school events and bedtime stories, patient during homework sessions and scraped knee emergencies, proud of every milestone Emma achieved and every new thing she learned about the world. The idea that this same man was simultaneously living a secret life with another woman, using our daughter as unwitting cover for his betrayal, was so contrary to everything I believed about his character that accepting it felt like agreeing to live in an alternate reality. But Emma's innocent revelation forced me to re-examine every interaction, every explanation, every moment when my instincts had whispered that something was slightly off, but my loyalty had shouted them down. The Saturday afternoon shopping trips that had become more frequent in recent months, always including Emma because she loved spending daddy-daughter time together. The increased attention to his appearance, the new cologne, the haircuts that seemed more expensive and frequent than usual, the phone calls he took in another room, the text messages he answered while facing away from me, the laptop that lived permanently in his briefcase instead of casually on our kitchen counter, the business dinners that ran later than they used to, the work conferences that seemed to require less communication home than in previous years, the general sense that his attention was divided in ways it hadn't been during our early marriage. Each of these changes had been explainable in isolation, easily dismissed when I was focused on managing our household and raising our daughter. David's career was advancing, which naturally required more attention to professional presentation and networking. Emma was at an age where daddy-daughter activities were important for their relationship and her emotional development. Work pressures were increasing, which explained his distraction and need for privacy during professional communications. I had been so focused on being the supportive wife and attentive mother that I hadn't noticed these individual changes were accumulating into a pattern, that my husband was slowly but systematically redirecting his emotional and physical energy away from our family and toward someone whose existence I had never suspected. The most painful aspect of Emma's revelation wasn't just learning about the jewelry. It was realizing that my daughter had become an unwitting accomplice to her father's betrayal, that her innocent presence was being used as camouflage for activities that would ultimately destroy the security and stability she took for granted. Every daddy-daughter adventure now carried the potential of being cover for meetings with his mistress. Every special outing could be concealing activities that had nothing to do with building their relationship and everything to do with maintaining his secret life. The thought that Emma might have witnessed interactions between David and this other woman, might have been exposed to adult behavior she was too young to understand, might have been carrying secrets she didn't even know were secrets, made me nauseated with rage and protective fury. The conversation I had with Emma about the jewelry shopping trip was the most delicate interrogation I've ever conducted, requiring the investigative skills of a detective wrapped in the gentle curiosity of a mother who didn't want to alarm or confuse her child. I asked questions that seemed casual, but were actually surgical, designed to extract information without revealing why that information was important, or what it might mean for our family's future. When had they gone to the jewelry store? After we got ice cream, but before we picked up Daddy's dry cleaning. Who had helped them in the store? A nice lady who said Daddy has good taste. How long had they been there? long enough for me to look at all the pretty rings while Daddy talked to the lady about sizes and stuff. Each answer was a small explosion in my chest. Confirmation that this hadn't been an impulsive purchase, but a planned expedition that required time, attention, and the kind of detailed conversation that happens when you're buying something for someone whose preferences you know intimately. The details Emma shared painted a picture of a man who was completely comfortable bringing his daughter along on shopping trips for his mistress, who felt no shame or conflict about using his child as cover for his betrayal, who was so confident in his deception that he saw no risk in exposing Emma to evidence of his double life. She described how he had looked at many different necklaces before choosing the one he wanted, how he had asked the saleswoman about gift wrapping, how he had used his credit card and carefully folded the receipt into his wallet. This wasn't a guilty man trying to hide his crimes. This was someone who felt entitled to his secret life, who believed he could maintain both his family and his affair without consequences, who was so arrogant about his ability to deceive me that he was willing to involve our daughter in his schemes. But the most heartbreaking detail Emma shared was her confusion about why such a beautiful necklace wasn't meant for me. Why Daddy would buy something so special for someone else when Mommy never gets sparkly things anymore. Her innocent observation revealed not just the affair itself, but the way David had been systematically neglecting our marriage, while investing time, attention, and resources in his relationship with this other woman. The jewelry that had once been a regular feature of our romantic life, anniversary gifts, birthday surprises, Christmas presents that made me feel cherished and remembered, had disappeared so gradually that I hadn't consciously noticed their absence. But Emma had noticed, had absorbed the message that Mommy wasn't the kind of woman who received beautiful things anymore, that Daddy's thoughtfulness and generosity were being directed elsewhere. Before I tell you how I used Emma's innocent revelation to uncover the full scope of David's betrayal, I need to ask you something that has haunted me since that Saturday afternoon in our kitchen. Have you ever discovered that your child has been witnessing pieces of your spouse's infidelity without understanding what they were seeing, carrying information that could destroy your family without knowing the weight of what they carried? Have you ever realized that while you were focused on creating security and stability for your family, someone was using that very security as camouflage for activities that threatened everything you were working to protect? If you've ever felt like you were living in a house where some conversations were held in code, and some activities required explanations that didn't quite make sense, subscribe to this channel now. Because what I discovered after Emma's innocent observation about that necklace isn't just about infidelity. It's about how people can use the trust of children to facilitate the betrayal of adults. How innocence can be weaponized against the very people who are working hardest to preserve it. The investigation that followed my daughter's casual comment will change how you think about the stories children tell and the secrets they carry without even knowing they're secrets. The first step in my investigation was the most difficult. Accepting that I needed to investigate at all, that Emma's innocent observation wasn't a misunderstanding or confusion, that the evidence she had provided required a response rather than dismissal. Part of me wanted to believe that there was an innocent explanation, that the necklace was for a business colleague or family member David had somehow never mentioned, that the pretty lady was someone whose relationship to our family was legitimate but had simply been omitted from our conversations. But the specificity of Emma's description, the expense suggested by her enthusiastic account of the jewelry's beauty, and the casual way David had included our daughter in this shopping expedition made innocent explanations impossible to sustain. I began by examining every aspect of our recent life through the lens of Emma's revelation, looking for clues I had missed or dismissed as unimportant. David's increased attention to his appearance suddenly seemed less about professional advancement and more about impressing someone whose opinion mattered to him more than mine. His frequent Saturday errands with Emma, which I had encouraged as healthy father-daughter bonding time, now appeared potentially calculated to provide cover for activities that had nothing to do with parenting. His general distraction during family time, which I had attributed to work stress, might actually have been the mental absence of someone whose emotional investment was divided between multiple relationships. The credit card statements I examined told a story I had been unconsciously avoiding, a pattern of purchases that made perfect sense once I knew what to look for. Restaurants I had never heard of, jewelry stores I had never visited, hotel charges that didn't correspond to any business trips I knew about. The financial evidence of David's double life had been hiding in plain sight, camouflaged among legitimate expenses and business obligations, invisible only to the wife who trusted her husband completely and had no reason to audit their shared accounts for evidence of betrayal. The amounts involved weren't small or casual. This was a sustained financial investment in another relationship, the kind of spending that indicated serious emotional commitment and long-term planning. But the most damning evidence came from David's phone, which he had left charging in our bedroom while he showered, providing me with 15 minutes to examine the contents of a device I had never thought to search before Emma's revelation changed my understanding of our marriage. The photos told the story more clearly than any confession could have. Images of David with a beautiful woman who appeared to be in her early 30s, pictures of romantic dinners and weekend getaways, selfies that radiated the kind of intimate happiness that belongs to people who believe they're building something special together. The text message conversations revealed a relationship that had been developing for over a year, complete with pet names and inside jokes and the kind of daily communication that indicated constant emotional connection. The woman's name was Isabella, and from their conversations it was clear that she believed David was separated from his wife and in the process of finalizing a divorce, that their relationship was heading toward something permanent and publicly acknowledged. She wrote about looking forward to meeting Emma officially, about the beautiful necklace he had chosen for her birthday, about their plans for a weekend trip that coincided exactly with David's upcoming business conference in Portland. The cruel irony wasn't just that David was cheating on me. It was that he was lying to Isabella as well, maintaining our marriage while promising her a future that would require him to destroy the family he was still actively participating in and claiming to love. The photos of Emma that appeared throughout David's conversations with Isabella were perhaps the most disturbing evidence of how he had been using our daughter to facilitate his affair. Pictures of Emma at the park, Emma having ice cream, Emma playing on the beach during what I had believed were father-daughter adventures, all shared with his mistress as evidence of what a devoted father he was, how well he would care for the children Isabella mentioned wanting to have with him. Our daughter had become a prop in David's performance of being the kind of man worthy of Isabella's love. Her innocent joy and trust in her father turned into marketing material for a relationship that would ultimately require her own family's destruction. The timeline that emerged from David's communications with Isabella coincided perfectly with changes in our marriage that I had attributed to normal evolution and the pressures of raising a child while advancing careers. The decreased intimacy between us had started right around the time his first messages to Isabella appeared. The reduction in family activities and couple time corresponded, with increased frequency of his work, obligations, and business dinners. Even the changes in his interaction with Emma made sense once I understood that he had been documenting their time together for someone else's consumption, that his increased attention to creating photo-worthy father-daughter moments wasn't about strengthening their relationship, but about impressing the woman he was planning to replace me with. The private investigator I hired to document David's activities provided professional confirmation of what Emma's innocent observation and my own detective work had already revealed, but also filled in details that painted an even more comprehensive picture of his betrayal. Mistress. She was someone he was setting up to become his next wife, someone he had been introducing to aspects of his life and future plans that included Emma, but completely excluded me. They had been house hunting together, looking at properties and school districts that would be good for Emma, planning a life that assumed my eventual disappearance from the family picture through divorce rather than through any consideration of ending their affair. The most devastating discovery was that David had been preparing Emma for the eventual transition by gradually introducing her to Isabella through chance encounters and casual meetings designed to make his mistress seem like a natural and welcome addition to their father-daughter activities. The pretty lady Emma had mentioned wasn't just someone she had seen at the jewelry store. She was someone Emma had been meeting regularly during her outings with David, someone who had been cultivating a relationship with my daughter while planning to steal her father and destroy her family. The systematic nature of this preparation revealed a level of calculation and long-term planning that made David's betrayal feel less like infidelity and more like a hostile takeover of our family. My sister Jennifer, who had always been my closest confidant and most trusted advisor, provided both emotional support and strategic guidance as I processed the evidence of David's comprehensive betrayal. Her response to learning about the situation was immediate and protective. He's not just cheating on you. He's grooming Emma to accept his mistress as her stepmother while keeping you completely in the dark about plans that will destroy your life and change hers forever. Jennifer helped me understand that what I was dealing with wasn't just adultery, but a form of family manipulation that involved our child. That David's behavior constituted not just betrayal of marriage vows, but potential psychological harm to Emma. Jennifer's background in family therapy gave her insights into the damage David's deception could cause to Emma's emotional development and her ability to trust relationships in the future. Children who are used as unwitting accomplices to parental betrayal often struggle with guilt and confusion, wondering whether they could have or should have done something to prevent their family's destruction. The secrets Emma had been unknowingly carrying, the adult situations she had been exposed to without understanding their significance, the way her father had used her presence to facilitate his affair. All of these experiences could have lasting impact on her sense of security and her understanding of how adult relationships work. The strategy Jennifer helped me develop was designed to expose David's betrayal while protecting Emma from unnecessary trauma and confusion. Rather than confronting David immediately with all the evidence I had gathered, we decided to document everything comprehensively first, creating a legal record that would protect Emma's interests in any custody proceedings and ensure that David couldn't manipulate the narrative to his advantage. The goal wasn't just to end his affair or save our marriage. It was to ensure that Emma's future was protected from someone who had proven willing to use her innocence as a tool for facilitating his own selfish desires. But the confrontation became inevitable sooner than I had planned, triggered by Emma's innocent question about when she would see Isabella again, when they could go to the pretty lady's house like Daddy had promised. The casual way Emma mentioned these plans I knew nothing about, commitments David had made without consulting me, Promises that involved our daughter in a relationship I was supposed to remain ignorant about forced me to realize that David's timeline was accelerating, that he was moving towards some kind of revelation or transition that would blindside me completely if I didn't take action to protect myself and Emma. The confrontation took place on a Tuesday evening after Emma was asleep, when David was relaxed and unsuspecting, settling into his usual routine of checking work emails while I cleaned up from dinner. I placed a selection of the evidence I had gathered on the coffee table. Photos from his phone, credit card statements, the private investigator's documentation of his activities with Isabella, and asked him simply, "Who is the pretty lady Emma keeps talking about?" The transformation on his face was immediate and complete. The casual confidence of someone who believed his secret was safe, replaced by the trapped panic of someone who realized that months of careful deception had been exposed by his own child's innocent observations. His first response was predictable. Denial, followed by minimization, followed by attempts to manipulate me into believing that what I was seeing was somehow less significant than it appeared. Isabella was just a friend, a work colleague who had become someone he could talk to about professional stress and career challenges. The jewelry was a thank you gift for help she had provided with a business project. The romantic photos were taken out of context. The intimate text messages were being misinterpreted by someone who didn't understand the full situation. Each explanation was more elaborate than the last. Each excuse required me to doubt not just my evidence, but my own intelligence and ability to interpret clear documentation of his betrayal. But the moment that revealed David's true character wasn't his denial or his lies. It was his casual admission, when the evidence became impossible to dismiss, that he had been managing a difficult situation by keeping both relationships going until he could figure out the best way to transition from our marriage to his relationship with Isabella. "I never meant for you to find out this way, and I never wanted Emma to be involved. But Isabella makes me happy in ways that our marriage hasn't for a long time. I thought I could handle both relationships until I figured out how to make changes that would be best for everyone, especially Emma." The breathtaking selfishness of this explanation, the complete absence of concern for the emotional damage he had caused to me, and the psychological manipulation he had subjected Emma to, showed me exactly who I had been married to for 10 years. Someone who viewed his family as a logistical problem to be managed, rather than people deserving of honesty and respect. Emma wasn't his beloved daughter whose welfare should be protected at all costs. She was a complication in his affair, someone whose presence needed to be factored into his plans for replacing his wife with his mistress. I wasn't his partner deserving of truth and consideration. I was an obstacle to his happiness, someone to be deceived and eventually discarded when the timing became convenient for his new relationship. The most chilling aspect of David's response to being confronted was his immediate transition to discussing custody arrangements and property division. His assumption that now that I knew about Isabella, we could all work together to create a co-parenting situation that would allow him to pursue his new relationship while maintaining his connection to Emma. He had clearly been preparing for this conversation for months, had developed strategies for managing the crisis of discovery that prioritized his own comfort and his relationship with Isabella over the emotional well-being of the wife and daughter he was abandoning. His primary concern wasn't the pain he had caused, or the trust he had violated. It was whether he could minimize the disruption to his new life while maintaining access to Emma on terms that wouldn't interfere with his plans to build a family with someone else. What David revealed during that horrible conversation was that his relationship with Isabella had progressed far beyond casual adultery. They were planning to move in together, to get married once his divorce from me was finalized, to create the kind of family life he claimed our marriage had failed to provide. Emma was part of those plans, but only in the limited capacity that would allow David to maintain his role as her father, while Isabella took over the primary female presence in her life. The future he had been planning didn't just exclude me. It required my elimination from Emma's daily life, my reduction from wife and mother to weekend visitor in my own daughter's existence. The legal consultation that followed David's confession confirmed what Jennifer had already explained. His systematic deception and manipulation of Emma could be considered emotional abuse. His use of our daughter to facilitate his affair constituted behavior that family courts would view as detrimental to her psychological well-being. The evidence I had gathered wasn't just proof of adultery. It was documentation of someone who had proven willing to sacrifice his child's emotional security for his own romantic convenience. Someone who couldn't be trusted to prioritize Emma's needs over his own desires in future custody situations. But the most satisfying aspect of the legal process wasn't the settlement I received or the custody arrangement that protected Emma's interests. It was watching David realize that his carefully planned transition from our marriage to his relationship with Isabella had been completely derailed by his own carelessness and arrogance. Isabella, who had believed she was entering a relationship with a man who was honestly ending his marriage, was horrified to discover that she had been dating someone who was still actively maintaining his family life while lying to everyone involved. The revelation that David had been using his daughter as cover for their affair, that Emma had been unknowingly facilitating a relationship designed to destroy her own family, was more than Isabella's conscience could accept. At this point in my story, I need to pause and ask you something that still keeps me awake at night. If you discovered that your spouse had been using your child as unwitting cover for an affair, teaching your son or daughter to keep secrets from you while documenting their innocence for someone else's consumption, planning a future that included your child but completely excluded you, what would you do? Would you focus on protecting your child from further manipulation, even if it meant your own justice was complicated? Would you prioritize exposing the betrayal immediately, regardless of the impact on people who had done nothing wrong? Would you seek revenge that matched the scope of the deception? Or would you focus on healing and building a better life for yourself and your child? Tell me in the comments what you think you would choose, because the decision I made affected not just my own future, but the psychological well-being of a 6-year-old girl whose only crime was trusting her father completely and loving him unconditionally. The strategy I developed for managing the aftermath of David's betrayal was designed to protect Emma from unnecessary trauma, while ensuring that David faced appropriate consequences for using her innocence as a weapon against her own mother. Rather than exposing his affair in ways that would humiliate Emma or make her feel responsible for our family's destruction, I focused on creating a narrative that emphasized my strength and our fresh start, rather than her father's failures and betrayals. The goal was to help Emma understand that sometimes families change in ways that nobody wants, but that love doesn't disappear just because living arrangements become different. The most challenging aspect of this approach was helping Emma process her confusion about Isabella's sudden disappearance from their father-daughter activities. Her disappointment that the promised visits to the pretty lady's house were no longer happening. Her concern that she had somehow done something wrong to cause these changes. Emma had genuinely liked Isabella, had enjoyed the attention and gifts that came from being included in their outings, had been looking forward to the role she thought she would play in whatever relationship was developing. Protecting her from the truth about why those plans had changed required careful explanation about how adult relationships sometimes end for reasons that have nothing to do with children, how her father's choices reflected his character rather than her worth. The therapy sessions that became part of Emma's routine were designed to help her process the changes in our family structure without carrying guilt or responsibility for events that were entirely outside her control. The child psychologist we worked with specialized in helping children navigate parental divorce and family transitions, teaching Emma that her father's choices about his relationships were adult decisions that she couldn't influence or control. Most importantly, the therapy helped Emma understand that her observations and innocent comments hadn't caused our family's problems. They had simply revealed problems that already existed, that her honesty about what she had witnessed was good and important, rather than something she should feel bad about. But the most profound healing came from the conversations Emma and I had about trust, honesty, and the difference between secrets that protect people and secrets that hurt people. She learned that adults who ask children to keep secrets from other adults are usually doing something wrong, that her job as a child was to tell the truth about what she saw and experienced, rather than managing adult emotions or protecting adult relationships. These lessons would serve her well throughout her life, helping her recognize manipulation and resist people who might try to use her innocence as a tool for their own purposes. The financial settlement from our divorce was substantial, reflecting not just the division of marital assets, but compensation for the emotional damage David's deception had caused to both Emma and me. The court was particularly interested in his systematic use of our daughter to facilitate his affair, his willingness to expose her to adult situations she was too young to understand, his plans to transition her into a new family structure without consulting the mother who had been her primary caregiver since birth. The judge's comments during the custody hearing made it clear that she viewed David's behavior as indicative of someone who prioritized his own convenience over his child's emotional well-being, someone who couldn't be trusted to make parenting decisions that served Emma's interests rather than his own. The custody arrangement that emerged from our divorce proceedings reflected the court's understanding that David had proven himself willing to manipulate Emma's trust and innocence for his own purposes, that his judgment about what was appropriate to share with a 6-year-old was fundamentally flawed. His visitation was supervised initially, designed to help him rebuild his relationship with Emma, while ensuring that she wouldn't be exposed to further manipulation or inappropriate adult situations. The restrictions weren't permanent, but they would remain in place until David could demonstrate that he understood the difference between being Emma's father and being someone who used her presence to facilitate his own romantic relationships. Isabella's decision to end her relationship with David, once she learned the full truth about his deception, provided a form of justice that was more satisfying than any legal settlement could have been. She had genuinely believed she was dating a man who was honestly ending his marriage, someone who was committed to building a future based on truth and mutual respect. Discovering that she had been part of an elaborate deception that involved using a child as cover for adultery was more than her conscience could accept. Her departure from David's life left him facing the consequences of his choices alone. Without the relationship he had sacrificed his family to pursue, without the future he had been planning while lying to everyone who trusted him. The transformation in Emma following our family's restructuring was gradual but remarkable, reflecting the relief that comes from living in an environment where truth is valued over convenience, where adult problems are handled by adults rather than being hidden behind children's innocence. She stopped asking complicated questions about adult relationships, stopped carrying information she didn't understand, stopped feeling responsible for managing emotions and situations that were beyond her control. The anxiety and confusion that had been building as she tried to navigate her father's secret life disappeared once she no longer had to carry secrets she didn't know were secrets. The new traditions Emma and I created together were built on foundations of honesty and transparency that our previous family life had been missing, even when I hadn't realized what was absent. Our Saturday adventures became genuine mother-daughter time, not cover for adult deceptions or opportunities to document our happiness for someone else's consumption. We developed new rituals around truth-telling and trust-building, creating space for Emma to share anything she observed or experienced without fear that her honesty would cause problems or hurt feelings. The home we built together became a sanctuary where secrets weren't necessary because nothing happening required secrecy, where love was demonstrated through presence and attention rather than gifts and manipulation. The community of support that emerged around Emma and me once the truth about David's betrayal became known was both surprising and deeply healing. Shared their own stories of discovering that their children had been unknowingly exposed to parental infidelity, of learning that their trust had been exploited not just as wives, but as parents protecting their children's innocence. We formed a network of families who understood that divorce involving child manipulation required different healing strategies than simple marital dissolution, that protecting children from adult deception was an ongoing process rather than a one-time conversation. But the most valuable support came from other divorced mothers who had successfully rebuilt relationships with their children after exposing one parent's betrayal and manipulation. They taught me that Emma's healing would be measured not by her ability to forgive her father's choices, but by her capacity to trust her own perceptions and maintain healthy boundaries in all her relationships. They showed me that protecting Emma meant teaching her to recognize manipulation and resist people who tried to use her love and loyalty against her best interests. Whether those people were family members or strangers she would encounter throughout her life, the professional success I achieved after freeing myself from a marriage built on deception and manipulation was profound and lasting in ways that surprised everyone who knew me, including myself. Without the constant stress of living with someone whose words didn't match his actions, whose love came with conditions I could never fully understand or control, I discovered energy and creativity I hadn't possessed for years. My career flourished as I channeled the investigative skills and strategic thinking that had exposed David's betrayal into professional achievements that brought both satisfaction and financial security that could never be threatened by someone else's selfish choices. The dating question came up occasionally from well-meaning friends who thought 2 years was enough time to move on and find someone new, but I found myself surprisingly uninterested in romantic partnership while Emma was still processing the aftermath of her father's betrayal and manipulation. My priority was creating stability and security for a child who had learned that adults could use love as a tool for deception, that the people you trust most might be the ones keeping the biggest secrets. Any future relationship would need to enhance the peace Emma and I had built rather than threaten it, would need to demonstrate unwavering honesty and respect for the mother-daughter bond that had become the foundation of our new life. The most profound transformation wasn't in my relationship status or even in my professional success. It was in my relationship with truth itself and my commitment to ensuring that Emma grew up in an environment where honesty was valued over convenience, where adult problems were handled transparently rather than hidden behind children's innocence. I stopped making excuses for behavior that made me uncomfortable. Stopped accepting explanations that required me to doubt my own perceptions. Stopped prioritizing other people's feelings over my own clarity and Emma's emotional security. Emma, now 8 years old, and thriving in ways that wouldn't have been possible if we had remained in a family structure built on deception, has internalized lessons about trust and honesty that will protect her throughout her life. She knows that healthy relationships are built on truth rather than secrets. That love doesn't require accepting treatment that makes you confused or uncomfortable. That her observations and feelings are valid even when adults try to convince her otherwise. Most importantly, she's learned that her mother will always choose her